Everyone. Thank you for attending today this hearing on public safety realignment. I am Senator Mark DeSaulnier. I represent the 7th Senate District in the California State Senate, which is all of Contra Costa County with the exception of the city of San Pablo, and then I split the city of Richmond with Senator Lonnie Hancock. This hearing, as it is informational, and I'm really delighted to have former colleagues on the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors, who we'll hear from in a moment, who represent East Contra Costa County. The reason we're having this is we had a similar hearing with state and county officials and local city officials in Richmond a few months ago to talk about realignment, the challenges and the opportunities, again with Senator Hancock and also with Supervisor John Joya. And I thought it would be wise to follow up and have a hearing here in East County because you are impacted by these decisions as well. In this case, as opposed to the previous one, we actually have been at this for a month or so, so we're starting to get some feedback and learn the process, and this is a difficult challenge that we're going through. The challenge came from Governor's suggestion, his budget, and it's, I think, in two parts in my mind's eye. The challenge for both state and county and local government to deal with our budget shortfalls, and also because of a federal court decision that said that we had to remove a significant portion of the population of the California Departments of Correction, and representatives from that department, who I'm thrilled are here with us, will talk to that. But basically the challenge of moving tens of thousands of inmates out of the Department of Corrections because of overcrowding, and at the direction of the United States federal courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, that we do this. So as we do that, working with our partners, we try to give them as much resources as we can, and I'm sure we'll hear from that. Having spent 4 terms, 3 full terms, and a partial term on the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors, I am not unsensitive or forgetful of how challenging it is to be a county employee, staff person, or an elected official, and particularly when the state asks county government to do more when they're very challenged themselves. So I do think that there are great opportunities here. We know that when we did a similar realignment with juvenile justice, that it actually has worked out fairly well, that actually the wards of the court have been able to get services, been able to get good services at the county level. And that's not to say that state employees in the state system can't provide those services, but that as a model we're trying to follow to some degree with this. So with that, I want to, again, thank you for coming. I want to recognize and thank the city of Antioch for hosting us. I know I see some other elected officials in the audience, and I will try to introduce you as we go along. I see Mayor Rob Schroeder and Councilmember Gary Agopian from Antioch, Mayor of Martinez, Rob Schroeder, and Bill Shin from the Concord City Council, and a former longtime employee of the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department, and ran our detention facilities here for years when I was on the board. So we appreciate you coming. We appreciate all of your public service. So again, thanks to the city of Antioch. Thanks for all of the people who are here. If you have questions about the agenda, there are copies of the agenda at the front. And if my staff people could just raise their hands if you have any questions or need help. Our staff from the district office in Walnut Creek are here to help you, and they're in the back. At the end of the agenda, we'll have an opportunity for public comments or questions. So we will recognize you and ask you to come forward to the podium when we get to that point. So with that, I want to turn it now to First County Supervisor Mary Pifo, who I had the pleasure of serving with, who has represented Eastern Contra Costa County for several years, and then we'll ask Federal Glover for some comments. Supervisor Pifo.
Thank you, Senator, to you and your staff for providing this forum for us as leaders and community members and members of the law enforcement community to come together and talk about the significant issue and impact of the state's determination of realignment and what it will mean to local communities and our citizens. It does, I believe we all recognize, shift greater responsibility to counties. Other social safety net programs will be directly affected by this shift of authority down to the counties that the state has not appropriately funded. The funding for 1 year is not sufficient for ongoing programs and protection of our communities, in addition to the disparity between the 58 counties within California, and I know you're very well aware of that, Mark. One of the most talked about provisions in the October 1, 2011 shift in responsibility to counties and local law enforcement is for monitoring, tracking, and incarcerating a number of low-risk offenders previously under the jurisdiction of the state. Contra Costa County has formed a community corrective partnership. The executive committee began meeting weekly early on in July to develop a coordinated and measured approach to managing the influx of state parolees. They provided a report to the Board of Supervisors on October 4th that we adopted. The plan outlines the team's priorities given the quick timeline for the turnover of responsibility and the uncertainty, again, of long-term funding. Contra Costa County has significant concerns over the formula by which money is being allocated throughout the state, and we will continue to press for more assistance and more guidance from our leaders. Counties and law enforcement throughout the state support placing an initiative on the 2012 ballot that would dedicate ongoing funding for counties and local governments out of existing state funds to provide these vital local services. Under the measure, these funds could not be rated by the state legislature. No offense, sir.
None taken.
Without this guarantee, essential local services could be placed at risk, including law enforcement and public safety services for abused and neglected children and seniors and more. Our local law enforcement departments are already severely challenged under the current economic crisis. I will say in Contra Costa County, from my perspective, we are not fully funding our law enforcement department like we should. This impact of realignment will severely affect our ability to maintain the critical thread we're trying to withhold today. From a conceptual standpoint, we agree with the shift as a matter of better policy. Our concerns remain around the uncertainty of sustainable and adequate funding. Absent the necessary funding and sufficient funding, counties can be no more successful than the state in reducing recidivism and would be saddled with yet one more unfunded mandate from the state. Our county chief probation officer, Philip Cater, has described again the impacts to Contra Costa County, the collaborative effort that has been engaged, and what some of the plans are for Contra Costa County to move forward in a united fashion with all of our local law enforcement agencies, and he will be talking about that in just a little bit. So, Senator, again, thank you for the opportunity to join you, for us to hear from the community and from you as a leader in the state about how we can move forward together and make sure that we are protecting our public in the highest and best capacity that we can.
Thank you, Mary. And now Supervisor Glover.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator DeSaulnier. We really appreciate you pulling the group together here today to inform the community on where we're at and where we're headed on this very crucial issue. About a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, when I served on the Public Protection Committee, we established a stakeholders group to talk about this whole issue and try to be proactive in preparing for this day. And along with that came a strategic plan in which has been put in place. Unfortunately, the strategic plan will not be able to be implemented because of the funding for that particular plan. But I do want to thank Senator Senator DeSaulnier as well as Senator Lonnie Hancock, because they had staff that participated in each and every one of those meetings and have bought into what that strategic plan is. And at the appropriate time when those funds are available, I think that we have a plan that's implemented that will really deal with the issues that we have in order to keep individuals from reoffending. And so we're going to be continuing to work towards that effort. Let me also say that I am a member of CSAC, and I serve as the chair of the Administrative Justice Committee. And we have continued to look at this. On November 29th, we're going to be holding a meeting. Our policy committee will be holding a meeting at our conference, which is going to be in San Francisco. in that meeting, we are going to have some of the same partners that are here today that will be talking about the impacts and what have taken place, as well as a number of supervisors that will be able to share in a roundtable discussion on the early impacts that they're seeing that has taken place. And so we're looking for that. We will continue to stay on top of this. I plan to continue to chair this, so it will be very local to us, the input that is given on the state level. Let me just say that Contra Costa is geared up to do what we have to. We know all the resources that we will need are not there, but in terms of facility, we're fortunate that we do have a facility to accommodate the beds to accommodate a number of those inmates. So as we look at what will be happening as we see approximately 30 some odd inmates that will be returning each month, we are able to accommodate that. The dollars that have been made available to us early on here is $4.2 million. Of those, the money will be used for the Sheriff Department and also the Probation Department. I think that's 7 employees in the Probation Department and some Sheriff Department. I think they are going to have 17 officers. So we're geared up to do what we can on the short run. We know that there's much more that will need to be done, and we're going to continue on this level to make it happen. But we are looking for the state to own up to the commitment that it has made in terms of making sure that this mandate does not go unfunded. Mary talked a little bit about the constitutional amendment that is going forth as an initiative on the 2012 ballot. And so we're looking to push that to make sure that this program is funded and that we're able to really deal with something that I think will be, in terms of a policy decision, a very good decision, but it's how it's all played out. So again, Senator, we want to thank you for bringing everyone together and informing the community. I think that we will continue to see efforts and trying to keep you updated on all the things that the changes that will be made along the way.
Thank you, Federal, and thank you for the little Freudian slip, Supervisor, since we spent so many years calling on the board together, and I've had that title for a long time. There are a few other electeds and representatives who are here that I just wanted to introduce before we start with the panel. Maurice Delmer, who's from Assemblymember Susan Bonilla's office, is here. Thank you for attending. Also, Tony Lloyd from the Kensington Town Council is here. I appreciate you coming, Tony. And we're very happy to see the District Attorney Mark Peterson, former member of the Concord City Council, is here and has just put his jacket on, so he looks appropriately authoritative. With that, we will go to the agenda, and we'll start with a perspective of the enabling legislation, AB 109 and AB 117, that was sent to the governor that provided the framework, at least the beginning framework for realignment. And we'll hear from the California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation, starting with Darby Kernan, who's the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Legislation. Darby.
Do you want to do some opening comments, or just okay? So I'm gonna. I think a lot of you probably know a little bit about realignment already, but I will briefly start with kind of the key parts to it, and I'll go fast through the parts that have already started in some ways. So realignment, just to take you to January last year this year when the governor proposed the budget, it was to eliminate parole in California and to eliminate the Division of Juvenile Justice in California, along with moving future offenders who commit felonies to local custody versus coming to state prison. And so through meetings that Secretary Matt Cate, who Terry and I work for, with local law enforcement, District Attorneys Association, the AOC, and different groups, worked on alternatives to such draconian proposals, and that's what realignment has resulted in. It starts with local custody, where nonviolent, non-serious, and non-sex offenders serve their time, changes who comes to state parole, and changes some parts of state parole. It creates a local post-release community supervision, and created a local planning process for realignment. So Senate Bill 678, which was passed in 2007, I think, created a community corrections partnership in every county. Not many of them were up and running prior to realignment. But what we did was we added an executive committee that consisted of the chief probation officer, a chief of police, sheriff, district attorney, public defender, a presiding judge of the Superior Court, and an additional representative from Health and Human Services appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And this group, which the supervisor talked about, is to get together and make a plan to present to the Board of Supervisors on how you're going to implement realignment. And I just want to note, realignment isn't, the goal the governor had was not that realignment is to do business as usual. It's to say, locals, you know these offenders, you can do a better job than the state, here's your opportunity. And so that's why we didn't just delegate what realignment was, but allowed each county to develop their plan for realignment. So it began October 1st. I want to say there were several bills that implemented realignment, and that's because AB 109 would have had a July 1st implementation, and then AB 117 went in and said, no, we're going to wait till October to implement it. So there was a delay in implementation because of concerns locals had. The funding, which I do understand, we're from the Department of Corrections, we don't talk about the money, but I do want you to know it is a dedicated revenue source. It's part of the sales tax, it goes into the realignment fund, and it is ongoing. That money is ongoing. The allocation for this year was a one-year allocation based by CSAC, who really encouraged that because everything was based on projections. And nobody really knew what would happen if our projections would be accurate or not. And so while there is a dedicated revenue source for realignment, and for that to change, the governor would have to take an action and the legislature would have to pass it to stop that or divert it. It's not an easy thing to do. And so I know that there are concerns about the money, and I think the governor is very supportive of a constitutional amendment, but I need to be clear. It is a dedicated revenue source that cannot be changed lightly, and the governor has said he would not change that. It does need a constitutional amendment to protect that funding, but that money is there. And they hope to look at the formula, which can be changed, and CSAC is already looking at that, and your county people can talk more about that. So who's sentenced locally? AB 109 was over 600 pages because we had to go in and change everything that was more than 1 year that was non-serious, non-violent, or non-sex to be served in county jail. We maintain the length of sentence for everyone, but in prison, it's for county jail, you have to have no prior serious violent or sex and no current. So some of the additional features that were added to realignment for locals is that the county can do alternative custody. It can do, there you go, yeah. Home detention for low-level offenders, and local jail credits became similar as to prison, so it's day-for-day credit, so there's consistency. And again, one of the biggest, I think, myths for us was that we were going to have busloads of people coming from state prison and going to the county jails. And in fact, the news cycle on October 1st, we got a gazillion press calls saying, okay, where do I find the bus? And we were like, there's no bus. So who comes to state prison? It's anybody who has a prior or a current serious or violent offense, which is defined in the penal code, is required to register as a sex offender according to PC 290. And then there's an exclusion list of about 66 or 70 additional crimes that come to state prison, and those are because they don't fall into the serious and violent definition. However, they include physical felony abuse of a dependent or an elder, assault on a peace officer, and then anything that was changed by an initiative, we were not able to change because these were majority vote bills. So possession of horse meat still comes to state prison. We call it our 3 stakes you're outlaw. Come on, you got to throw me a bone here, people. Work with me. All right. So the other ability we gave is that counties can contract back with the state to send local offenders to state prison. So if you are to get somebody with a very long sentence, counties do have the ability to send them to state prison, more likely to our fire camps, which is 2 for 1 credit. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
I'll cover all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's also the ability to contract with public community correctional facilities. These are in county and city-run facilities in California that we contract with now and will not be able to any longer because we don't have those offenders. Contracting back does not include for parole violators. Parole violators serve their time in county jail now and not in state prison. So again, no one from state prison was transferred to county jail, and nor will they be. So post-release supervision, the Board of Supervisors designated the agency of who should be doing post-release community supervision. All 58 counties chose probation. We were informed of that on August 1st, and then we had a month and a half to go through all of our screened offenders who would be going out previously on non-revocable parole or parole, and we had to rescreen them to see who would go out on post-release community supervision, which Terry can talk to after a little bit. So CDCR is required to notify counties at least 30 days in advance prior to release of who's coming on PRCS. Our long-term goal is 120 days, and we are trying to move to that direction. So who goes out on community supervision? It's only your current offense, so it's very different than who comes to state prison or in county jail. It's your current offense that you're being released on is where you go for county supervision or PRCS. You cannot have a current violent, so you're a current non-serious, non-violent, and you can be a sex offender. It does not include a third strike, individuals with serious or violent, and anyone who is defined as a high-risk sex offender as defined by CDCR. And CDCR defines, it's by the...
Static 99.
Static,
I'll cover that.
Okay, so she'll get that. So if an offender is released from prison, what happened was as we were changing this, parole revocations were already, people who were serving parole revocations were in jails and prisons throughout the state. We were concerned that we wouldn't be able to screen everybody and that there would be lapses from people knowing if they were on parole or post-release supervision. So we had to make some changes in the law so that anybody who was released from prison on October 1st and had completed a revocation on or after November 1st, so we had a window of screening people, the parolee would either remain on parole or, if they qualify, would be placed on post-release community supervision. And then any parolee who was in county jail serving a term of parole revocation on October 1st and was being released directly from a jail, they stay on parole. And that was really so we wouldn't have to go into 58 different county jails to try to serve people to give them their papers to say you're on post-release community supervision. So the tools that are given for post-release community supervision, there's revocations up to 180 days in county jail. It authorizes graduated sanctions such as flash incarceration at the local level, which is considered swift in certain sanctions. So if somebody comes in and has a bad test and has used drugs, you can take them in right there and give them up to 10 days incarceration. Individuals on post-release supervision without any violations after 6 months can be discharged. Post-release community supervision is 3 years. It cannot go longer than that, but it can be discharged if you have no revocations at 6 months. And the courts adjudicate all of the violations and new conditions of release at the local level. The law is very clear, though, that CDCR has no jurisdiction over any person who is under post-release community supervision, and no person shall be returned to prison except for persons previously sentenced to a term of life. And that was because that's prior to realignment, anybody on a lifer who was on parole could be sent back to prison for life. So we didn't want to mess with that. So parole changes. We've take hold of the serious offenders, violent offenders, and all high-risk sex offenders, and anybody convicted of a third strike. In addition, mentally disordered offenders, which is a small group, but anybody who's defined as a mentally disordered offender would stay on state parole as well. Changes that we made to parole include revocations to be served at 180 days in county jail. Revocations used to be up to 12 months in prison. That is now only 180 days with day-for-day credit in a county jail. Contracting back for revocations is not an option. We do authorize graduated sanctions for our parolees as well, where they can do the flash incarceration. And again, only people previously sentenced to a term of life can come back to prison on a revocation. The parole revocation process stays in place until July 2013, and then it will be transferred to the courts. One of the reasons is the courts are learning the whole post-release community supervision, but our parole population drops, and so we didn't want to burden the courts with such a temporary increase that would be leveling off in 2 years. And so the transition of parolees for revocations and adjudicating violations transfers to the courts in July of 2013. For the remaining low-level offenders on parole, so the non-non-nons who are currently on parole, after realignment has been implemented, they also can be discharged after 6 months if they have no violations. The 6 months discharge is prospective and applies if he or she has either been on parole continuously for 6 months after October 1st and the person is not retained by the Board of Parole hearings for good cause, or the person has on or after October 1st been on parole for 1 year and the BPH does not retain for good cause. And that language is just very specific because of people trying to game the system a little bit. So that's, in general, realignment. Terry could probably follow up with more of the details of the implementation and where I lack.
Thanks, Darby. We will ask Terry McDonald to do a presentation. Terry is the Chief Deputy Secretary of Adult Operations at the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation.
Thank you, Senator, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today talking about what is most assuredly the largest change in public safety in California's history. In the shortest time frame that any group of leaders have had to implement such an incredible shift. Darby spoke pretty fast, and she'd run out the door if we'd let her, but she'll be here to answer some questions. I want to kind of cover the operational side of the business because a law of this magnitude, change of this magnitude, impacting probation and police chiefs and board of supervisors and the courts and the sheriffs and the jails, mental health departments and your substance abuse communities and welfare circumstance. This is an incredible opportunity and an incredible challenge. And when it started, it was supposed to be implemented July 1st for those folks that were tracking it. And as we began to sit down and talk about how are we going to do this, it was clear that that wasn't enough time for the simple case that The probation chief most assuredly couldn't have hired probation staff to be able to take the workload. And the jails may have needed to add capacity, and the courts and the district attorneys and the public defenders weren't ready to start doing the hearings. And I would say that some of them probably would say today it still was too soon. But having said that, we've been working closely with all of the organizations and more, and they've done an incredible job of protecting communities as we move forward. And that is the truth of the matter. I'm an operations gal. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a budget gal. Run prisons and parole. That's what I do. And I can tell you that your probation chief and your sheriff and your police chiefs have all stepped up to ensure that your communities are safe in a very complex situation. When we started to talk about how we were going to implement this, the first largest piece, state to county, and I know that your county partners in the courts will talk about how you did it locally, so I'll cover kind of that state to county relationship, was how did we tell probation who's coming to them, right? Historically with corrections, California corrections, everybody who comes out goes out to parole supervision. California is one of 3 states in the nation that does that, right? And we are the only large state in the nation that automatically people went on parole. Well, last year, I think around April, the legislature implemented a law called non-revocable parole. So we started, when we were processing offenders out for parole release, some offenders went out to non-revocable parole, which meant they didn't have a parole agent supervising them, and they couldn't be revoked for a parole violation, but they were subject to search by local law enforcement. Non-revocable parole goes away with this new law. But let me clarify, anybody on non-revocable parole remains on non-revocable parole. So the new law says that folks coming out come out underneath 2 different tails, right? Either the current serious violent high-risk sex offenders, they go out to parole supervision like they always have, but the others go out to probation. I think one of the misconceptions, not by the people that doing the work, but maybe the public misconception, is that probation wouldn't be getting sex offenders. Well, they are getting sex offenders, or that they wouldn't get somebody that had a history of a serious or violent offense, but they do get people who have a history of serious and violent offense. They supervise them now. It's what their current offense is. How we designate a high-risk sex offender is mandated by law, and the state uses an actuarial tool called the Static 99. It's a sex offender risk tool. The Static 99, by the use of the tool itself, if they're designated from 1 to 9 on risk to reoffend, the tool itself says if they're designated a 6 to a 9, they're a high-risk sex offender. The Department of Corrections says we're going to go ahead and say if they're a 4 or a 9, they're a high-risk sex offender, and we'll keep them. And we're able to do that because the law allows that. So when they come out, if they're a sex offender, we run the Static 99, and then we determine whether they come to us or they don't. As we determine, Terry McDonald's going to go out to probation. Probation needed information about Terry McDonald. So the probation chief sat down with us and said, here's what we need from you, and negotiated a package that we would hand over to probation as we move forward. It is the same exact information that we give to parole. And as Darby mentioned, we try to get that 30 days in advance. But I think the probation chief would tell you one of the implementation challenges is that the chief may think somebody's going to come out 2 months from now, and lo and behold, we call them and say they're coming out tomorrow. And I don't know if you've experienced that. That's a condition of credit earning. Because the offenders coming out, they earn credit while they're in prison, and that credit adjusts constantly. Whether the courts give them some time back or they earn a GED and they get time. And so the goal is to get that package out to probation 30 days in advance, and I think ultimately we'll get most of them out 120 days in advance. That package has information about their crimes, their institutional adjustment, their mental health needs. So, but it's in state prison code. Right? The truth of the matter is we're all in kind of the public safety business, but we don't speak the same language. We have acronyms that make sense to us, they make no sense to probation. So we had to start to translate for probation that this is a mentally ill offender, and then probation's saying, hey, I need to know their diagnosis and their medication, but we couldn't tell them that because of federal laws on privacy for medical. So we engaged county mental health to talk about, okay, how can our mental health clinicians hand that off to you? I think both areas, an area for improvement. So we worked with the counties on that. The second large challenge has to do with capacities for the jails. The Department of Finance gave out projections on what the impact would be, the number of offenders that the sheriff would have to manage in the jail. But those were based on a 3-year full implementation. And so if I was the sheriff, I wouldn't know, well, how many am I going to get in October? Because that's really what you need to know. So we gave out projections by month of who would be coming out, we thought would be sentenced locally. And we've been spot on in some places, and we've been off in others. And I get some phone calls from sheriffs wanting to arrest me if they can. But projections are projections, right? They're based on historical trends, and so you have to kind of watch projections over a period to see how close. Now, I'm pleased to hear that Contra Costa County, it sounds like, has capacity. But if they didn't, we did a couple of more things for sheriffs, and I'll talk about why I think we've vexed the sheriffs a little bit, and I'm sure sheriff will add more to that at his time. But the state of California, because of overcrowding, has contract beds both out of state and in state. We have about 9,500 prisoners that we house out of the state of California, and those are higher level offenders that required cell capacity. But the state of California also had contracts for 5,000 beds in state for low-level offenders. Well, under realignment, those low-level offenders stay locally. They don't come to prison. And so we didn't need those contract beds, and so we canceled our contracts, emptied out of those facilities to open them for the sheriffs if the sheriff wanted to manage offenders that way, or the county. It's not just up to the sheriff, but if the county wanted those beds, we pulled out of them. The other thing is the offenders that are being managed locally are generally offenders that we put in fire camps. And if you watch the TV about wildland fires and fires raging in California and you see people fighting those fires, more than likely than not, that's a California state inmate. They do incredible work protecting our state, combating wildland fires. But they're non-serious, non-violent, non-sex, and that's who we put there. And so we also said, counties, if you need capacity, we will, you can contract with us to watch your low-level offenders at a designated rate. Now, the sheriffs are like, that's some really tricky business. You realign these inmates to us, and then you charge us to give them back. So I understand that concern, but it's also important to understand that the Department of Corrections were funded by population, and just as money was moved to the counties, the State Department of Corrections lost $453 million. And so there's nobody to watch those guys if we take them. So we opened up that capacity solution for them. The discussions are ongoing and consistent, and there's bumpy times and there's going to be bumpy times, right? There's going to be bumpy times where the probation chief says, you guys said this guy's mine and he's not mine. Well, we're there to say, let's work through that problem. Or the sheriff, the courts have, we've had some people sentenced to us erroneously. Well, you would expect it. It's a learning curve. So we reach back to the court and say, Your Honor, I think that you gave us the wrong guy or gal, and then we just work through that. I want to cover a couple more clarifications to Darby, and then I'll end up my discussion. Mentally disordered offender, it always comes up, so I'm going to try to answer some of the questions I think you're going to ask ahead of time. Mentally disordered offenders, parole keeps them. That's a small population, and mentally disordered offenders are defined by the penal code. So it's actually a sentencing issue, and the courts order them. Sexual violent predators are always considered high-risk sex offenders, so they're always within parole supervision. There's been allegations as we implemented after October 1st that parole has been increasing their revocation and killing the jails with capacity. So we are monitoring parole behavior on a weekly basis to see whether or not there's any validity to that, and there is no validity to that. Parole has actually had about 800 fewer parole revocations in the last 31 days than they have historically. I will tell you that local law enforcement parole holds, though, have remained kind of static. And so that creates a little bit of a problem. think I talked about that. Probably the last thing that I would want to cover that you would be interested in is what the senator talked about when he started, which is these are unprecedented times where you add a budget crisis to the fact that the state of California now has a federal cap on the prison population. So the state had the state no longer could ignore the fact that our prisons were overcrowded. We got our original order of overcrowding to reduce our population from, at the time we were at 200% overcrowding, to 137.5. The state appealed that all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and we lost. So fight's over. And so realignment is a way that the state can address the overcrowding of the state's prisons within the time frame that the United States Supreme Court ordered, without a mass early release of prisoners. It may not currently be perfect, but I do think it was the right solution based with the enormous challenge the state was under our state prison system, right? Because it's all of our state prison system, not just mine. And so we appreciate the legislature's willingness to help us address the problem and the courage and commitment from the locals to help implement a really complex piece of legislation. And Darby and I will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you again. It's a big state, and you have a lot of responsibility, so I very much appreciate both of you attending this and the time you've put into it, as well as the hearing as we had in West County. Before we go to the county perspective, I did want to recognize a few other people who have come in. Representing Joan Buchanan, Iris Obregon, who's her district director. We appreciate the representation from both Assemblymember Bonilla and Buchanan's office. Tommy Vandenberg from the Community College District, who is joined by Robert Colon, also from the College District Board. And then last but not least, Councilmember Mary Rocha from here, the city of Antioch. And I just want to mention for the average citizen, I know we have a lot of law enforcement people here in the audience, but when this is recorded out, a lot of what we talk about may seem like inside baseball. That's because all of us work in this world to various degrees. So whether it's county probation or state parole or the sheriff's department or your police department or the California Department of Corrections or the probation department, I know it's confusing. Terry mentioned acronyms. Government acronyms are difficult. You move from transportation to housing to public safety to health to human services. Every part is very difficult, and I know particularly in this community, and want to be sensitive to this, is Eastern Contra Costa County, because of the Garrido case, is particularly sensitive to the final result, which is the safety of average citizens. So when we talk about this, it may be a little daunting to the average citizen. And if you have questions or comments, either here, of course, we're going to have public comment later, but if you watch this on public access TV, or we're going to live stream it on our website, if you have questions, feel free to call us at our district office in Walnut Creek or email us, and we will try to translate you through what sometimes I know to the average person is a daunting, seemingly very large bureaucratic process, which is not untrue, but it's sort of a function of how we organize things. And ultimately, what we're most concerned about is public safety and doing that efficiently and effectively. So with that, we will turn to the community, the Contra Costa community, and get their perspective of how things are going. And we're going to start with the chief of the Contra Costa Probation Department. And I know, speaking as a former member of the county family, a department that we have had great leadership in this county over the years in, and Phil Cater, coming to us from Fresno County, is keeping in that tradition. So we're delighted to have you here. He is the chair, not only the chief probation officer for Contra Costa County, but he's the chair of the Community Correctional Partnership Executive Committee that Darby mentioned.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for the kind words in the introduction and for putting this process together today. You'll hear from various people from the county that I think will explain how they have been directly impacted. And so I will try my best to keep the comments specific to either the Community Corrections Partnership Plan or the impact of probation. I've asked either one of the folks surrounding me that if I get off track, they're allowed to kick me under the podium. So if you see me jump a little bit, that's probably what occurred. I'll do my best, though, to stay on task. There are some people I want to recognize that are here today that I think are important to the discussion, and that I hope everyone in this room feels comfortable enough to approach when and if they desire to do so. We have two of our administrators in probation that have been instrumental in helping us gather data, that are the ones getting those packets from CDCR that are trying to say, why did we get this one? And why did we get a call on Friday when they're getting out on Sunday? But for the most part, it's been a fairly seamless effort, and overall, I would say that we've been pleased overall. Okay, I guess that makes sense. They're sitting over there in the corner. You see Mike Newton, the manager of East County Probation Services, and Todd Bellici is our director of Probation Services. I've asked them to join me in this conversation, and certainly they're allowed to jump up and go, Chief, that's absolutely incorrect, and they will pay. They will pay a consequence later for that, but they're allowed to do that. I also want to acknowledge, in a very sincere way, all the folks here today that have come to those community corrections partnership meetings. As soon as the bill was passed, we began meeting weekly. It was not an always pleasurable experience, but I think we accomplished a good document. I wouldn't call it a great document, but a very, very strong document that starts addressing the issues and tries to present options for the county in moving forward on that. Many of them are here. I do want to acknowledge them. Robin Lipinski is right over there from the Public Defender's Office. Chris Magnus was on the committee, designated from the Contra Costa County Police Officers Association. Mark Peterson, of course, our district attorney, was there. Judge Becton, who was on the podium here, was on the executive committee and a voting member. Cynthia Ballon, who is not here today, represented the health department. She is in charge of homeless, alcohol and drug services, and mental health services. And, of course, Mike Caston next to me, who attended virtually every meeting. I know we have more than our share of representatives from the Sheriff's Department that kept coming to these meetings, and we're very engaged. I will say all our votes that I can recall were unanimous. We did a good job, and I'm proud of the job. I saw a couple of smiles. I will say the unanimous votes were perhaps reluctant, but nonetheless were that way, and I think it's important to acknowledge the hard work all of them put into in regards to this. Okay, let me share a couple things about Contra Costa County. In Contra Costa County today, we have about 3,406 people that are on adult probation. The probation rate for Contra Costa County is 326 per 100,000. So per capita, 326 for every 100,000 people. The state average for probation is 881 per 100,000. Yet our crime rate is at 2,255 per 100,000. The state rate is a little bit below that, which is 2,001 per 100,000. Why do I want to share that with you? There's an obvious point I'm trying to make. The state average of people on probation is almost 3 times what Contra Costa County has. When you then begin to look at people on parole that get sentenced to a prison, I should say, out of our county, CDCR rate, meaning the Department of Corrections rate, we are by far the lowest of people that are sent to prison. Our rate in this county is, the state rate is, I'm getting these numbers mixed up, I'm so excited to talk about it, is 768, that's what our rate is, 768 per 100,000 people. Okay, I'm getting it right now. The state rate is 1,821 per 100,000 people. Now, that's a lot of numbers to throw out. The important point is this county does not send a lot of people to prison per capita. We're the lowest in the state in regards to that. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, part of the funding structure I know will be discussed by our CAO, and I won't beleaguer that point much more. but it did give us only $4.5 million to try to address an issue of how profound this impact is on our county. And although, as Terry McDonald, who has been to CPOC meetings, CPOC is the California Chief Probation Officers of California, worked with Karen Pank and our team very, very well, and I must say has done a really remarkable job considering how much time they've had to deal with this, which is about the same amount of time we've had to deal with it. So it's tough to be, it's kind of difficult to be too rough on them. Keep in mind that about a year and a half ago, the Department of Juvenile Justice, the juvenile justice criminal system used to be called California Youth Authority, we've been already monitoring those folks when they get out of there for about the last year or so, over a year. We already deal with some of the more serious juvenile offenders that this county has felt we couldn't keep locally and had to send to the state. A couple points that have been impacted has really impacted probation in a very overwhelming way. We're very interested in doing a good job. We even spend time, we write a letter to each person in prison before they get out. We contact them by mail and say, welcome home. It's not exactly worded that way, but it's something to that effect. And simply says, we want you to do well, and we will help you, and we will do what we can to support you when you come out and back to Contra Costa County. We've only had one of the first about 35 or so that have come out that have failed to contact us. We now have only one of those folks that are out of touch with us and that we have a warrant for their arrest on. There are many that are out that are the typical criminal that we would have expected, and I say criminal meaningfully. They did commit a criminal offense. Generally, they're what we would have expected. Drug users, thieves, people have committed drug offenses and theft offenses. Yet, there are a slew of them that are coming out that are really frightening us. Not to the point of running away from them, but to the point of making sure that we're monitoring them as effectively as we can. Here's a quick example, and it was mentioned before. There is a controlling case. The controlling case is what is the crime, their most recent offense that sent them to prison. So we have a growing number, I think at the last count, 6 of in the first 3 months, about 2 a month, that their crime was failing to register as a sex offender, which means what? They must have been a sex offender. So we are getting people out on these non, and I understand the static 99 formula, that's the tool we use as well. But their controlling offense is something not nearly as significant as what sent them to prison in the first place. So when we look at our list of people that are coming out, it's in some ways not representative of their criminal behavior and what they're capable of doing. And we're worried about that. So we're doing our best to monitor them. Those letters that we've sent out to San Quentin and Folsom have notified those folks to contact us. They've been pretty good about contacting us. But I want to give you an anecdotal example of some of the difficulty these folks are having. We have a young man who comes out that we've told him not to affiliate with any gangs, not to associate with gang members. He contacts us and says where I'm living is with a cousin and an aunt, and they're full-blown gangbangers. That's who I'm living with. Are you telling me I can't associate with them? He moves and decides to live with his sister, and we allow that change because we check. Sister says, yeah, I can live with us. We already know that her husband and the uncles that frequent the place are full-blown gang members. And the row back there know these guys. They're the police chiefs in the communities where a lot of these gentlemen, predominantly gentlemen, are going to. And they're the ones contacting us and going, hey, what's up with Fred? You know, he's out, and what are you guys doing? You know, he's living with his gang-banging cousin. So we have challenges, but understand, these are challenges we're used to having. This is not unique. This is not something extraordinarily new. What is different for us is the sophistication of their criminality, the depth of their criminality, and as I indicated early on with the very low numbers of people that go to prison, you have to be a pretty bad guy to get to go to prison from this county. So when you're coming out, we're doing our best to keep an eye on them and protect the community. I will say our contact with local police has always been good. Since I've been here, it's been phenomenal how responsive and helpful they've been. We hope we are reviewed the same way. But we're very concerned if we're going to be able to provide the kind of support that perhaps local police have grown accustomed to in the past. All I can tell you is we're going to do the best we can to make sure we coordinate with all the other folks. Let me share a couple other quick stats. We would have thought when we first developed the releases, these post-release conviction folks, that we were going to get a predominant amount of people coming out of the West County. What we have, and this is numbers that I printed up this morning, we don't have 111 people out yet, but we're beginning these packets, and out of the first 111 we expect, 26% are in the Central Quarter, 28% are West County, and 37% are East County. Now, if you do good math, if you're good at math, which I'm not, that's why I'm reading it, you notice that there's 7% left over. Well, those folks that are coming out are at a much higher rate than we anticipated, are homeless. Of those folks, and there's 8 of them, we already have 5 of those guys in homeless protection or homeless shelters. That's not a permanent setting, and we're doing everything we can with the health department and with their contracted agencies to help provide that level of service. It is interesting that people coming out of the institution that have a long history of drug abuse, have a long history of theft, committing thefts, that come out, we say, well, we're going to drug test you, would like to give you some opportunities for drug treatment. And I don't even know if there's any. I think there may be 1 out of the first 30 or so. None of them have drug problems. That's what they tell us. I don't have a drug problem. I've been in prison. There's no drugs available. We found that a little hard to believe, but nonetheless, the point is no one has a drug problem. And most of them don't believe they have mental health issues. We don't want to wait for them to have a breakdown. We don't want to wait until they end up getting strung out on some drugs, but it is difficult to provide a level of service to them without some cooperation on their part. We can make them go to those things, but if they're not going to be responsive, we don't want to waste the space. There is one final point, and I know I'm missing many things that I'm sure I should be talking about, but there's so many people that are still up here to follow that I'm sure they'll address many of these things. One of the goals we have in our department is to try to change the thinking of the people that we are dealing with our clients. We're trying to change how they see the world, how they think about stuff. When I've been approached and said, Chief, what happens if you lose your job? What happens if you upset the judge and the board goes after you? What would you do? And I tell them I'd probably have to find another job. Yet there is a thinking with many folks that have a long history of criminality that when things don't go their way, they'll respond by committing crimes. They don't think like I do. That may not be a terribly bad thing for them, but clearly their ability to kind of turn something that may be not as such a bad positive, a bad negative, into something much worse. And I want to give you an example. We heard an example of a gentleman that had a part-time job. He wanted a full-time job. He had 20 hours a week that he was working at a place. And he was upset. He only had 20 hours a week. And he quit his job. And he ended up with 0 hours a week. And when asked, why did you quit your job? And he goes, I wasn't getting enough hours. And he goes, how many hours were you getting? And he goes, 20. Well, how many are you getting now? And he goes, none. It's just a different way of thinking. Even if we were unhappy about 20 hours, you know what most of us would do? Would work the 20 hours until we could find a job that would give us more than 20 hours. So it's a cognitive approach to how we're trying to deal with these clients. It's a big issue for us. We brought out Dr. Ed Latessa, who is nationally known in regards to cognitive thinking and evidence-based practices. We're in collaboration with the court. We have a meeting this afternoon to try to help come up with risk needs assessments that might help with release from jail earlier. We're doing everything we can to train our team to build cognitive and empathy, cognitive skills and empathy with the clients that we're dealing with. We will be bringing Insight Prison Project that's out in San Quentin into our facility, starting, not our facility, the sheriff's facility, starting in January, that not only does life skills but cognitive approach to dealing with there are many folks' lack of empathy in the type of crimes they've committed. Boy, let me tell you, there's a binder full of information I'd be more than willing to share. Many of you in this room have heard me talk about this and how strongly I feel about it. You know I could go on and on about it, but I'll show respect to the folks that are here and conclude my remarks simply by saying we are committed to making this work. I was accused by a supervisor who happens to be sitting right next to me at the last board hearing that I was optimistic. And she goes, "You seem so optimistic about this." And if you recall the conversation we had, and we've talked about it afterwards, of course, was I had two responses. One was, well, what's our option? What are we going to do? We can't call you guys and say, we don't want them. Yeah, we don't have a choice. The second thing was, we believe we can do better. Recidivism rate with the state's in the 70 percentile. Recidivism rate on probation departments statewide is in about the high 30s. I know they're different clients. I know we won't have that same level of success, but I believe we can do a good job. And we need the community support and the ability to have engaging the community with a watchful eye by the community to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do. I think we can have a level of success. And I urge all of you here that have a chance to join us at our meetings or contact me directly by email or by phone. Please don't hesitate to do so.
Thank you, Chief. Phil is not only the Chief Probation Officer, but he's the designated county department head for humor.
Unsuccessfully.
Unsuccessfully. But we do appreciate it. And the comments you've made we can talk about perhaps a little bit later. The first 2 years I was in the State Senate, I was happy to have the designation of chairing the Budget Subcommittee that had corrections in it and sat through many hearings, and Senator Hancock now does that. In addition, Senator Hancock has the Policy Committee on Public Safety, so we are well served in our relationship with our neighbor Senate district to impact some of these decisions. But one of the really nice things about representing Contra Costa County at the state level and at the local level was and is that these turf issues that show up, and they show up everywhere, are less here, that we have honest, hard discussions, and you can sort of tell that by the tone of the comments so far, but we respect one another, and ultimately I think all of us try to figure out how best we serve individuals in Contra Costa County and the community, and I appreciate that working relationship with the cities and the county and the school districts and the special districts and all the community-based organizations. So that's not to say that we don't have difference of opinion, and we have some fairly spirited discussions about that, but that's the nature of things. So Phil, thank you for your comments. Now we will go to the presiding judge of the Contra Costa Superior Court, Diane Becton.
Okay, thank you, Senator. And I'll join in those who have thanked the Senator and his staff for convening this forum and the opportunity to participate. My task today is to give you a very, very brief overview of the effect of the criminal justice realignment on the courts. And I just have a quick PowerPoint just to try to share with you, first of all, some of the very fundamental changes within our court that have affected us. The first is that our sentences are different. As you've heard, we have this category called the nonviolent, the non-serious, and the non-sex crimes. And for those sentences are now served in county jail rather than in state prison, effective October the 1st. The next fundamental change for us is the way we calculate credits. The credits for most crimes will be at 50%. And the third fundamental change is our revocations. For those who are on post-release community supervision, they will now be adjudicated by the courts, and any revocation time would be served in our county jail. In terms of how realignment changes our sentencings, we've already mentioned that they'd be served in county jail, and that's for crimes where the penal code section does not specify a term of punishment, and also where the statute now specifically requires punishment in the county jail. There are a number of felonies that are excluded from county jail. Those would be where there has been a prior or current serious felony, those where the defendants are required to register pursuant to Penal Code Section 290, and also where the defendant is convicted of felony with an enhancement for aggravated theft, and these are sometimes referred to as aggravated white-collar crimes. Also, punishment where the statute specifies time in state prison, and you've already seen a summary of many of those. There's nothing in the criminal justice realignment that limits the length of county jail time. So just an example, if the court were to sentence a defendant to what would have typically been state prison for 8 years, there is the possibility that they could be sentenced to serve all of that time in our local county jails. I've already mentioned that the custody credits have changed. Most inmates who've committed a felony will receive 2 days of credit for every 2 days that are served, and that applies to persons who are serving a sentence of at least 4 days or more. There's another significant change, and that is that there's no automatic parole period. In other words, when a person is now sentenced to state prison, but they fit in one of these categories where they're serving their time locally, they serve their term. So if the term is 2 years in state prison, they serve that term and they're done. They're completely free of supervision when they are released from our jail. There is one tool that is available to the courts, and that's called the split sentence. This is where the judge has some discretion to impose a split sentence. They can impose a period of time in custody in our county jail, and that in custody period can then be followed by a period of release on mandatory supervision. And this has to be done in accordance with the terms and conditions and procedures that are generally applicable to persons placed on probation. So an example of that would be where the court would sentence to a 3-year term. It's a state prison term, but because they fit into one of the non categories, they'll be serving their time with us locally. The judge could then split that sentence and require, for example, 2 years to be served in custody in county jail, and the remaining year to be served, to be released, under post-release community supervision. And they would have terms and conditions that are similar to what we would see now when a person is placed on probation. The other significant change for us will be the revocation of supervision. The inmates from state prison who are returned to our county, assuming that this is their county of last legal residence prior to incarceration, beginning October 1st, the petitions for revocation of those who are on post-release community supervision will be filed here in the Superior Court where they are supervised. And beginning 2013, we'll also have the revocations filed for those who are under the parole agency supervision. That means that we have to gear up for those hearings. In addition to participating in the community partnership meetings that have already been referenced, the court has had to conduct training among its bench officers. We've also had to train our staff, develop new forms and procedures so that we are able and ready to implement these new provisions. We have not yet had a petition to revoke the post-release community supervision. We're expecting that we'll start to receive them probably sometime around February or March of this year. And so we are gearing up for those hearings now in our court. We have just a few options that are available to us if there is a petition filed. Once the hearing is completed and we found that the person did violate, then we have the opportunity to return them to community supervision. We can modify some of the terms if we'd like. We can also send them to county jail for up to a maximum of 180 days, or we can refer them to what's called a reentry court, which we're now talking about because it does not yet exist in our county. And the other things that we'll have to do, and I'll just mention very briefly, we'll have to do with case management. We'll have to gear up for opening new case files for all of the petitions that are filed, keeping and preparing statistics and reports. There's just a couple of other things that I'd want to mention where we're going to be impacted. We're probably going to hear much of this when we hear from the undersheriff, But we understand that there are a number of people who are in our local custody who are actually awaiting trial. So one of the things that Mr. Cater mentioned today is we're going to be meeting with a group of our judges and some of our other justice partners to look at the risk needs assessment so we can determine whether or not we need to change our practices in looking at who gets released into our community when they are awaiting trial. We're also meeting with some of our justice partners to look at the idea of developing a reentry court. Our court currently operates a number of what we call specialty courts. We have a mental health court, we have drug court, we have domestic violence court, we have homeless court, we have veterans court. We participate in the county's efforts toward Homeless Connect. And all of those courts, we're operating as everyone else is in very challenging budget times. The court has lost over 25% of its budget in the last 3 years, and we've reduced our staff by over 118 people within the last 3 years. So we have dwindling resources, and we recognize now that we still need to serve our community, but we're probably looking at new ways to do that, and that may include trying to incorporate some of the best ideas from each of those courts into one new court that may look something like a reentry court. So those are the efforts that we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Becton. And I know that you've been very impacted, as we all have. I did a tour recently of the Martinez of the Taylor Courthouse, just on the civil side, to see what a challenge it is, and the paperwork. And so, if anybody thinks there's a huge amount of waste, fraud, and abuse, and there are in large organizations, I would challenge you to come and take a look, because you're doing a lot with less all the time. We appreciate that. Our next presenter is the implementation of realignment in Contra Costa County, and it'll be presented by the Undersheriff of the county, Michael Keston.
Thank you, Senator, for inviting the Sheriff's Office to participate in this. First of all, I would like to say this process, even though it was on a tight timeline, the group worked together very well. All our law enforcement partners in this and outside of law enforcement partners in this did the best they could in a short amount of time, and I am, as well as the sheriff, is pleased with the plan that we've put together with the limited amount of funding, and I'm sure the county administrator will get into that. And I would also like to acknowledge one of the persons in my staff that did a lot of heavy lifting in this is Commander Matt Schuler, sitting here in the second row. He's responsible for running all 3 of our custody facilities, and by no means is that an easy task in normal circumstances, and it definitely is not an easy task in the last month. So I'd just like to thank everybody who's worked on this. I mean, the support of the Board of Soups of the plan was, we appreciate that, and everything that's come about to this date, we've been very happy with. With that, what I really wanted to talk about was we've had a month of life under AB 109, and what is that impact to us? And I totally agree. Estimates are estimates, and there's no way we're faulting estimates. But we in this county have seen impact dramatically different than the estimates, and we've been keeping track of our impacts in our facilities. As I said, we operate 3 facilities. One's a minimum security facility, one's a medium, and one's a max. We do have capacity in this county to handle the influx of inmates under this plan. However, we did have staffing limitations, and so through the plan that has been addressed. We feel sufficiently that we can open up the bed space we believe we need to house the inmates that the courts want us to house under this plan. The plan calls for us opening 119 beds at our West County Detention Facility, 70 beds at our Marsh Creek Detention Facility, and 100 more enrollees or clients on our electronic home detention, GPS monitoring type of a situation. So we do believe we have the capacity. The first month was a little surprising to us. Activity from October 1 to October 28th, we saw 90 parole violators come into our custody. with an average custody of 52 days. That's 90 as of today that are in our custody. Total, we've seen 115. AB 109 commitments, new sentences under AB 109 since October 1. We currently have 19 in custody with a top term of 3 years. And we've seen 20, so one's been obviously released. These numbers cause us to take notice. We don't know if the criminal justice system was waiting for AB 109 to get new client or new sentencing guidelines in place for the people that were waiting to be sentenced, so there was a spike in October, or if this is the way things are going to be from here on out. Our projections estimate we'll see an increase in inmate population over the next 9 months of 354 inmates. We believe after that it should level off. With those numbers, we projected some numbers, the state projected some numbers. The current plan really impact in regards to us. We've seen a 101% more parole violators in custody than we anticipated, and AB 109 commitments at 200% more than we anticipated. So we're going to have to work through all that. And to that regard, funding is key. Guaranteed funding is a very important to the sheriff's office, because obviously this is going to be something we're going to have to deal with in years to come. And part of this, the judge did an excellent job going over the sentencing structure, and what I sort of wanted to do was give the group a feel of what is an inmate under AB 109. What do they look like? Well, who are they? What kind of sentences have they had in the past? And so I asked my staff to just randomly pick 4 people that have come to us under the AB 109 sentencing guidelines, and just so you get a feel, who these people are. We'll call them inmate number 1, drug possession conviction, sentence 16 months. Priors, a burglary, stolen vehicle with a 16-month sentence, state time. Stolen vehicle, 2 years. Burglary, grand theft, drug possession, sentence 16 months. And another stolen vehicle, sentence for 2 years. A random inmate number 2, stolen vehicle evading, 2-year sentence. Priors had 11-month sentence for a stolen vehicle and a 16-month sentence for a stolen vehicle. Inmate number 3, a drug manufacturing case. One of those new sentences, a split sentence, 5-year split, 2 years county jail time, 3 years community supervision. And priors on that person was they had a 2-year sentence for drug manufacturing, 1 year for drug possession, and 90 days county jail time. That's another random inmate, felony DUI. They got 2 years under the new sentencing, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 priors, 2 of which were stolen vehicles, 2 of which were spousal battery, and 2 of which were drug possession. So those are the types of people coming to the county system. It's the sheriff's office and Sheriff Livingston's position that we will try and we will keep as many of these people in custody that are ordered to be in custody. We believe we have the capacity to do it, and we'll take advantage of that capacity. Our only, hurdle in all that in regards to capacity, most of our bed space resides within our medium and minimum security facilities, not within our maximum security facility. So if we, through our classification system, these people don't qualify to go to a medium or minimum secure facility, we will have some hurdles, and those could be fairly significant. But we're going to look at all that and do the best we can. Unfortunately, we do have the bed space. It's not always the right bed space in that regard. So just to really summarize our position is we'll do whatever we can to make this work. We're committed to that. We're committed to those police chiefs sitting out here in the audience that have to manage the crime on the streets. and to minimize the impact to those folks and their people who work out there every day. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. We appreciate you being here, and we appreciate the support from Sheriff Livingston. The last speaker, and then we'll go to questions or comments from first the panelists and then from the audience or any other things that my former colleagues on the board would like to add, is the county administrator. He's got the hard job of trying to keep all these departments in a budget with both elected and appointed department heads, and it's no easy function. So with that, we appreciate the county administrator being here, and we would anticipate for his thoughtful comments, David Twa.
Thank you, Senator. I could be very brief and simply say the funding's inadequate, and that would pretty much cover everything there is. But I think you need to take away from today's session a few things. Number one, certainly you've figured out by now how extremely complex this is, and how everybody up here, as well as all of you in the audience, are trying to adjust to this change. The other thing I think you certainly can take away from this is the fact you can see how immensely cooperative it has been at the county level in order to accomplish this, and that goes to the Community Corrections Partnership. They deserve a lot of thanks for not only just very hard work, but for being able to come up with a plan that addresses these things even though the funding is inadequate. And as you look around the state, you may have seen, for example, in the paper, Sacramento County just adopted theirs after a great deal of fighting and difficulty. And we're seeing this across the state, and that is a lot of fighting over the money because it is inadequate to provide all of the various things that we need to provide in order to make this thing work. And so it's a great compliment to Contra Costa County, and certainly to the Community Corrections Partnership, that they were able to work through these problems and come up with a plan that, even though it is drastically underfunded, is the best that they could do under those circumstances. The other thing you have to understand is this is not the first time that the county has been through a realignment, and that is traditionally when the state has some difficulties, they like to realign programs at the county level, and have been through many of these myself, and what I can generally say is the realignment comes with a lot of responsibilities, but typically not enough money to accomplish everything that you need to accomplish, and that's certainly true here. The other thing with traditional realignment programs is they take years to perfect, and typically they have been stretched over a period of years in terms of implementation. In this case, in reality, it just dropped on the county as a practical matter in many respects. And so it is extremely challenging to try and come up with a system that's going to work. And again, I think that what you've seen is through the cooperation of the departments, they're doing a dramatic thing. One of the things that we know, and of course the state has said, well, look, this is dedicated funding. It comes from the state sales tax and the vehicle license fees. But there is a big difference between dedicated funding and guaranteed funding. And it's for that reason that many of us are nervous, and that is that these programs are being dropped on us without the guarantees that we believe we need in order to get through this. And just to put it in perspective, as you've already heard, the funding formula basically, and formulas are put together, quite frankly, by people looking at it and saying, how much money do I get and what's the best formula that works for me? Well, in many of the bigger counties, Los Angeles, for example, which tends to be the gorilla in the room, was able to say, here's what we need. Unfortunately, what happened, of course, as you look at Contra Costa, Alameda, and San Francisco County in our particular areas, we got the short stick as it relates to this. When we looked at it, we figured we needed about $12 million annually in order to provide even the minimal level of services in order to do this program adequately. What we got was $4.5 million for the first 9 months, and if you average that out, obviously that's $6 million annually to do this program. And one of the sheets that we passed out today, and hopefully you had an opportunity to look at, essentially, even for what minimum programs that we have listed, it would take probably about $7.5 or $8 million to even do those. And that doesn't provide any funding for city public safety entities. And a number of the police chiefs, not only within Contra Costa County, but around the state, have said, well, wait a minute, where's our share of these dollars? And again, unfortunately, there isn't enough money even for what we want to do, let alone the type of money that you need out in your communities to deal with these issues. The other thing, just beyond public safety, is this whole issue of supportive services in the communities. We cannot do a decent job in terms of turning this population around if we don't have housing, if we don't have transportation, if we don't have services for mental health and chemical dependency, and jobs. I mean, those are all things that we need, and because of the collapse of the economy, we are woefully lacking in all of those areas. So that makes the job that we're trying to deal with, not just from the public safety standpoint, but from our communities in general, that much more difficult. So our goal at the county, of course, is to do a couple things, one of which is to try and see if we can get a better formula going forward to provide adequate funding for our communities as well as for public safety in order to deal with these issues. And secondly, just as of yesterday, the statewide county organization, along working with public safety throughout the state, has now filed our constitutional amendment, hopefully to get it on the ballot for the November 2012 election, that would guarantee the funding for these programs. And we believe that that is extremely important if, in fact, we're going to accomplish what we need to accomplish. Again, it comes as no surprise, so we're going to lobby for changes to the formula, and we are going to lobby to get this constitutional amendment in. In the meantime, we will do the best job we can. The work continues. One of the sheets that I passed out, notice the Community Corrections Partnership will be meeting in December and in January, and those meetings are open to the public, and as Phil has said, please, we would like you to attend if at all possible, and certainly be supportive of our efforts in order to make this thing work. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I know on the issue of the formula that we worked, specifically myself and Senator Hancock at first, and then Assembly members Buchanan and Bonilla and Skinner and Swanson. When we found out what the formula was going to be, we rushed and asked leadership to change it. The response was that, and this is hopefully with Supervisor Glover's new leadership, and I know Supervisor Joy is also very involved in moving into leadership at CSAC, that we can follow up with legislation that tries to, what I refer to as no good deed goes unpunished, as the chief said about the number of clients that Contra Costa actually sends to state prison, you don't, and then the formula actually sort of punished you for that. So to the degree that it wasn't done right, it was done quickly, the argument partially that I've heard from people involved with it was that there was a very good discussion with CSAC, and there was a representative from Alameda County, I believe, in that working group. So we'll try to correct that, and it is a problem. I did want to just ask one question and ask my two elected colleagues if they have any comments or questions, and then open it up to anyone from the audience who has questions or comments, including the district attorney. We will allow him to make comments. But David, you mentioned it, and David Twa did, and the Chief Probation Officer did as well, about supportive services. You did it in an indirect way. So I know anecdotally, I've heard from our clients about access to support services. I had a specific gentleman once when I was in San Quentin say he was from Contra Costa County, and that he had gone, I don't know how many times back into the system when he tested dirty for drug and alcohol, but his complaint was, whether it's accurate or not, was that he had tried to get in a Diablo Valley ranch specifically, and he was unable to do that in a time where he could get residential treatment, so he went out and tested dirty again. So I wonder, when you say there's not enough money, and we look at other states like Missouri and New York who provide more support services, how do we get that, and do we have enough in this county, or how far behind are we maybe? We know we don't have enough. And I know Cynthia Balone, the health department, does a terrific job in this regard.
If I may, one of the things we have done with this plan, although woefully inadequate, is we do have reserved beds space in certain of the programs. We had someone during a meeting that we had going on with the health department, one of our clients came in for his initial interview, and said, I have no place to live. Within 40 minutes, he had a place to live. But that is uncommon. Those that know the system know that you can wait 30 to 60 to 90 days for some of these services, be it AOD stuff, alcohol and other drugs, or be it for mental health, inpatient efforts, even outpatient efforts. The county simply doesn't have, even with our contracted community partners, just don't have the space. What we were able to do with approximately $1 million of this fund is set aside space for the AB 109 folks that are either coming out of prison or have been sentenced locally and then transitioning out in the community. So they will get some preferential treatment. And it isn't as if the same amount of beds will be there. We will enhance contracts to enhance the amount of beds. So we're not pushing anyone down on the path. We should be able to do it. But here's a guesstimation that we had. We believe we at no time, at any given time, need more than about 8 to 10 spaces in the homeless shelter. In our first month, we're already halfway there. So we're in trouble. We're simply not going to be able to meet the needs of everyone that may need it. And that may be one of the things we underestimated. And actually, for those that were on the committee, we know we were actually initially set it up for many more. But as you whittle down the money, it had to come from various entities. And everyone on the CCP group that received funding did take a hit from what our original plans were. So it's going to be a struggle. It's simply going to be a struggle. One of the efforts we do have is reaching into the community and see if we can enhance some services. I've met with numerous different nonprofits, several hospitals that said, we want to help. What can we do? They will be at our next meeting. And I want to thank CAO Trois for indicating this committee is not finished. We see this as an ongoing project. We will meet monthly. Our next meeting is December 1st, 6 p.m. At 50 Douglas, right off Highway 4 in Martinez. And the following meeting is January 4th at the same time. We're having evening meetings. We'll get into various communities. We want to see what kind of response we get. So those that want to help, those that can point us in the direction of getting help, and those that want to come and bang the table, we welcome you to be there.
Okay, Supervisor Pifo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. A question and a policy suggestion. The policy suggestion is, and I've heard this recently and related to school issues related to gang violence on campus, and it's about the HIPAA regulations and the protections of privacy and the challenges that presents to the system when we're trying to protect the confidentiality and the privacy of the patient. It's not always a patient, it can be a student. And there are examples, one cited in Realignment, where the state can't share information with the county on a prisoner because of potential HIPAA exposure. And school districts can't share some student information from school district to school district, and often campus to campus within a school district based on HIPAA or student confidentiality. And when we're all government and we're all accountable, we should be working together, at least in some streamlined fashion. So I'm using your example and I'm compounding it, but Mark, maybe something for you to think about, big picture. My question is, and maybe it's one for our district attorney, is I'm curious what the impression is from our law enforcement community on the county's disparity compared to the state's percentage of people sent to prison. If we have a lower than the statewide average, what does that mean? And that's maybe more a curiosity question. Does that mean we're not prosecuting? Does that mean we're not getting good decisions at the judge's level? No offense, Judge Becton. I mean, what does that mean? From a community perspective, I'm curious what that means when our percentage of prisoners going, or criminals going to prison is so much less than the state average.
Do you have any thoughts, Chief or Sheriff?
Well, I have thoughts on everything.
Yes, I'm aware.
Know.
That's why I asked you first.
I've had the opportunity to talk to the DA, who can certainly speak for himself, and the courts, and it is a bit of confusing to us, especially when our crime rate is with the state average. Part of the response has been unclear to me. We've spent, when I first got here about 18 months ago, or a little less than that, I remember I went to then Presiding Judge O'Malley and said, why don't you send people to prison for violating probation? And she looked at me and she goes, I don't hear those cases. But she also said that we tried to do things differently, and we have a wealth of alternatives to try to help people stay out of the prison system. The difficulty with building that infrastructure is it's incomplete when it results in a consequence that hits us in compared to other counties in the distribution of the 109 funding. So I don't have an explanation that's been thorough. We don't know exactly why that is. It's probably a combination of many, many things. But it is an interesting statistic, and obviously has resulted in a county like Tulare County, who has approximately 400,000 people in their community. We're close to 1.1 million people who got $1.5 million more than we did for their AB 109 realignment funds. Now, they send more people to prison than we do, almost 2 to 1. So the formula is flawed, in our opinion, as far as that structure is concerned. But how it ends up with these numbers, I'll leave that to the people that are much smarter than I am.
Well, I would say I don't know if how many people you send to prison is a measurement, either good or bad. You know, when we first started doing reporting domestic violence, I remember years ago, everybody in public safety knows this. The statistics went way up, but that wasn't because it was all of a sudden happening. It was because people were reporting it. We were actually adjudicating cases. So it's an interesting phenomenon. We have tried to, and I think the department's doing this now, is do sort of a report card on evidence-based best practices around how do you make the public safer. And is an investment in prisons the best investment you can do to do that? I remember anecdotally having somebody who had worked for the department for many, many years, who's a former warden at both San Quentin and Pelican Bay, say to me at San Quentin, I don't know why people like you, meaning myself, elected officials, come here and are surprised that we give an inmate, we bring them in here, we get them stabilized to a degree, we give them $200, which is the same amount I think we gave them when they were released in the 70s, by the way. And you're surprised when they go back to Richmond or Oakland or whatever community and they're back in here within 30 to 60 days. So I think all of us are struggling with what's evidence-based practices that is the best investment, because we know we have less money. We know the public doesn't have the money to pay for lots of new taxes or any new taxes. So our revenue is restricted, and that's the hope for realignment, is that we'll do this better. To your question, Mary, both questions I think is a really good question about, and I remember once when I was on the board, I think all three of us were, when John Joya was chair, and he decided he was going to charge us all for using acronyms without describing what it was. And within 30 seconds, I think Chairman Joya had used 3 or 4 acronyms without. He still does. So the question of privacy and health in juveniles and whether their privacy rights, and anyone can jump in here who has a better understanding, is an illustration of we're trying to do good things, but we approach them from what people call silos, from each one of our individual silos. And it's something of particular frustration. I happen to have a bill that I'd be happy to work with you, and Phil and I talked about this when I met with him privately on Monday, is perhaps a pilot bill for Contra Costa. Now, we hear, whether it's a myth from school districts or from counties, that they need more waivers, that there are a lot of restrictions from the state and federal government on how you implement policy, and if we would just get out of the way and give you some, just give some oversight to say what are the best practices, what are the best results for the individual client and for the community, then we can take away some of these waivers. So actually, the bill we have would be a contractual one where a county could go ahead and we'd have to identify those waivers. What are the specific things you need for us to get out of the way? Is it privacy issues for kids so that mental health can talk to probation, can talk to the bench, can talk to state agencies? And is that sufficient for counties like a Contra Costa, which, for those who may be watching, we're the 9th largest county, if memory serves me, by population. Ironically, we're the 9th smallest by geographic mass, with 1.1 million people. in a state with 38 million people. So we do a lot of these things, but they tend to be sort of ad hoc, and can you bring them to scale where there's actually significant savings? And of course, that's always part of the problem, is you need money to change organizations in order to save them, and I know CDCR is dealing with that. So your two comments, I think, are really good ones. And I think following up on this is if there's a way for us to continue the dialogue as you find things on implementation where you think you could do better, if the state just got out of your way, or if we did certain things differently, I think your delegation is all ears to that. Senator Glover, since you call me supervisor, I'll return the favor.
Thank you for the promotion.
I don't know if people will consider it a promotion or not.
Well, let me just say that I think that this has been a great dialogue today, and I appreciate everyone sharing the various perspectives. One of the things that I'm hopeful of is that we don't lose the work that was done with the strategic plan. A lot of energy went into identifying our service providers that would be able to provide a number of the services that are going to be needed for individuals to be successful and the recidivism rate to go down. And that is up in mental health, job training, housing, and a number of other areas. So we've identified those service providers. Unfortunately, the dollars have not been identified. But I think the other piece is that as we continue to go forward and looking at what the right formula is, this may be an opportunity to share some benchmarks that we may be able to get from that plan that will share with us what our real need is per inmate. So that is something that I just hope that the correctional partnership can look at as they continue to meet.
Terry, do you have any comments, particularly around the question of the state average of what Contra Costa sends to prison, and the fact that we're lower? Is that an indication to you of anything, one way or the other?
Well, this is Terry, not the Department of Corrections. So this is Terry's opinion. It doesn't benefit your community from the sense of prisons are where they get more sophisticated. They come to prison, they make alliances and sophistications that when they bring that back out to your community, that's not necessarily beneficial to reducing your crime rate. I think it is very telling that if you've got a lower state incarceration rate and a similar crime rate, that something's going on here that's working from that perspective. And that's the whole concept of realignment. You know, the longer term, the more serious, the higher risk offenders, send them to state prison. That's what we do. That's our alley. The lower level offenders, as best you can, as long as it keeps your community safe, keep them locally and keep them away from the more sophisticated offenders. That would be my thought on it.
Thank you. So are there any comments or questions from any members of the audience? Mr. Peterson? You don't have to.
Want to come up there?
Yeah, certainly. You can experience public comment. I understand you're doing it lately in front of the Board of Supervisors.
Let me tell you about the hospital. No. Sorry. First of all, it's an excellent question that Supervisor Pifo had, and just some statistics. Our Contra Costa County, we're number 6 according to 2009 statistics as far as number of cases that go to jury trial. So we are a very aggressive district attorney's office, and I think the police agencies that are here would agree with that. I believe they're happy or satisfied to whatever extent they can be with the services that we provide in prosecuting the cases they bring to us. Not only do we do a lot of trials, we're number 3 in the state as far as conviction rate. So once we take the case to trial, we get those convictions. Now, what you got to keep in mind is that we're not in charge of sentencing. So sometimes we disagree with the courts, and they might sentence somebody to probation that we think is a state prison sentence. However, having said that, most cases get resolved by plea. And so the fact whether or not most cases end up going to state prison or probation probably does rest in large part with the district attorney's office. However, we have this group over here, which is the public defender. And the public defender's office is very good, and they're very sophisticated, and which is a good thing. And so we may want a case to go to prison, but we resolve it for probation for various reasons. So that in part, I think, explains it, not perhaps totally, but you may have other counties where, frankly, the defense isn't as sophisticated as our defense community is here, not only private attorneys, but public defender. And then I think, finally, I think the system that we do have does a pretty good job. I've been doing this for many years, and I would stand by our position as far as what we think is an appropriate case for state prison. I think we make pretty good judgments on that and have for many, many years. Now, we're always open to criticism or an evaluation of how we could do it better. And once I got these numbers, I got to say, frankly, I was surprised, too, at the actual numbers. So we're still drilling down on it to see what it means and see if there's anything we can learn from it. But as I think of it right now, I think it's still, we strike the right balance, in my opinion. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but appreciate it. Chief Magnus. And I did want to acknowledge we had another elected official, permanent elected official, join us, the Mayor of Oakley, Jim Frazier. So thank you for coming, Jim. Chief?
Hi, Chris Magnus from Richmond. I had the sort of pleasure or dubious honor of being part of this county group working on the plan, which Chief Cater convened, and he and his staff did a terrific amount of work on, and so it's helpful having this kind of follow-up forum, and appreciate you convening that, Senator. Did want to mention that, and particularly in response to Supervisor Glover's comments about the work that the county's already done around the strategic reentry plan, and the idea that the work is really only just starting on the implementation of this, that in light of that, the group really does support the notion of a community advisory body that we're trying to constitute now that will give us feedback as we move forward in trying to address, I mean, the work is really only just starting. And so the plan, you know, we came up with a plan, and that's excellent, and I think that's a good start, but now is where it really gets interesting. So moving forward, we're going to need the feedback from the community, from some of the service providers, from some of the organizations that have an interest in these issues, from some of the average citizens that are concerned around these areas, from folks who were involved in that reentry plan before, individuals who are formerly incarcerated that are now trying to make things better for other people coming out of the system. And so what we've done is set up a process that we're going to move as quickly as we can on to select a group of community members from throughout the county that represent these diverse interests, kind of a diverse group of stakeholders that can advise our committee, which in fact then is advisory back to the Board of Supervisors on these issues. So I would just say if folks are interested in being considered for selection onto that community advisory committee, we're working on the process for selection right now, but they could contact, I know out in this section of the county, we're going to be working with Elaine Prendergast from the Center for Human Development. She's going to be the liaison kind of on the east side of the county, and then we have Rebecca Brown on the west side, and the public defender and myself. We're the sort of the 4-member group that's trying to figure out the selection process so we get good representation from the community, and then they can start having some meetings to advise us, so we're making decisions that hopefully are helpful as we move forward with this process. So I just feel, please, if anyone's interested in being part of that, contact one of the 4 of us. We'll be trying to get the word out through different organizations and emails, but we want to move ahead with getting that group constituted as quickly as possible.
That's great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. And if you could let us know, our office will make sure that all the legislative delegation knows when you meet, and to the degree you need support or help for us, for instance, on the formula, there's going to be lots of follow-up, I'm sure, legislation. So where we can work with you, that'd be terrific. Anyone else from the public have comments or questions? Ms. Vanderbroek, can you come up just so we have you recorded? I know you're probably shy of microphones and whatnot, so. And this is Tommy Vanderbroek, who is a elected official in the Community College District.
Thank you, Senator DeSaulnier. My question is around the availability of beds, minimum versus maximum, and is there coordination among different counties to juggle those beds, and who has what types? And if not, are we looking at I want to say renovating the minimum to a higher security. You know, do we have the money to do that? Just some thoughts around that issue.
I do know that the counties do communicate via listserv on what bed space they have available in different counties. And obviously, you know, we would make available a minimum or medium bed space if we had a surplus of it to another county. And if counties had bed space that we needed, I'm sure arrangements could be worked out along those lines. And we do communicate like that. As the representatives from the state said, there is a state fire camp, and you can send your prisoners back to the state for state housing for a fee if we got into that situation. We are also exploring our current facilities and adding capacity in a medium facility or changing the way we do business to free up max security beds. Maybe our female population is better suited for a medium security facility. Maybe we can make some adjustments there. Those are all things we'll continue to look at over the next 9 months, year 2, year 3, and we're going to have to continue to make adjustments. You know, we did put in an interest letter under AB 900 for some jail construction, not because of AB 109 specifically, but because of our classification issues. And unfortunately, the formula for that is similar to the formula for AB 109, and we were turned down very quickly. So we're exploring all avenues in regards to that.
Any other comments from panelists? Thank you for the question. Anyone else? We are scheduled to adjourn at 3 o'clock, so I'm mindful of what an artful job we've done here. We did start a little late. Let me just close with thanking all of you for coming out and participating, thanking my panelists. I know you're all very busy, and I appreciate you taking more than an afternoon off, actually, a couple hours, but it morphs into an afternoon. And then a promise that we will continue to have dialogue and discussion, less formally than this and prospectively more hearings like this. But these are challenging times in the world, in the United States and California. And when it comes to public safety, of course, that is of utmost concern for our citizens, and it's our responsibility to do the best job with what we have. It's my hope with the challenges that we have, and of course the commitment that we provide, as the county administrator said, more than designated funds, but guaranteed funds in a world that doesn't allow for absolute guarantees, as we all know, that we provide local government with the resources they need, with the expectation that they will do the things that Contra Costa County has often done, is make the most with the least that they have available. And know that what we're most mindful of is trying to make the public as safe as possible and provide opportunities for those members of our community who have gone through the criminal court system and been adjudicated, that we can actually rehabilitate and correct their behavior, as is in the Department of Corrections name. So with that, again, appreciate very much Supervisor Pifo and Supervisor Glover and all the panelists joining me. I appreciate all the law enforcement people who are here today. If you have questions and comments, feel free to use our office to ask us directly for things that we can do. And then if there are other questions of the panelists or people who you have questions of, more than happy to allow us to be a facilitator for those. Thank you all for being here today, and we're adjourned.